I raised her on my own. That's probably where I went wrong. It was never supposed to be like this. I imagined we'd grow into best friends, the way my own mother and I never had the chance to. I dreamed of long phone calls, Sunday dinners, and being the kind of grandmother who got her own special mug at her daughter's house. Instead, my daughter said I was too old to be seen. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Diane. I'm 63. Not ancient, not fragile, not irrelevant. I've got a few silver strands in my hair and a bad knee, but I also have a dry wit, a bookshelf full of murder mysteries, and a laugh people say sounds like wind chimes. I was a single mother at 26. Her father left before she could say her first word. I didn't ask for help. I worked overtime, skipped vacations, and took up sewing so I could mend her clothes when money was tight. Everything I had I gave to her. Emily was bright, spirited, always ahead of her class. And I adored her. Maybe too much. Maybe that's what made her feel like love meant entitlement. She learned early on that I would bend. And I did. For years. She called me one Saturday morning, the kind of call you wait for your whole life. Mom, I'm pregnant. The joy caught in my throat. I cried, happy tears, overwhelmed tears, every kind of tear. I started planning. Not just the baby blanket I'd knit, but the meals I'd bring over, the little rocking chair I'd kept in the attic from when she was a baby. I even started setting aside money from my pension in case she needed help. A few weeks later, she invited me to her baby shower. Sort of. I want you to come, but not be in the pictures, she said, chewing her lip like she always did when she was about to say something hurtful. Why not? I asked, thinking maybe she wanted to keep the photo album small. She hesitated. It's going to be a modern, Instagram-friendly shower. Neutral tones, young vibe. The planner said it's better if the visuals feel consistent. You just don't really fit the aesthetic. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. She didn't laugh back. You're saying I'm too old to be seen? I asked, my voice catching. Don't be dramatic, she snapped. It's just one event. It's not personal. But of course it was personal. I stayed quiet for a long moment. Then I told her I understood. And I didn't go to the shower. That night, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the dark. It wasn't just humiliation. It wasn't just rejection. It was something deeper. A realization that somewhere along the way, I had become invisible to the very person I'd poured my life into. For the next few weeks, she sent me the occasional update, mostly surface level. No apology, no recognition of the hurt. Just pictures of centerpieces and cutest guest outfit awards she gave to her influencer friends. I kept knitting the baby blanket anyway. Old habits die hard. Then I started feeling off. Exhausted, even when I hadn't done much. Lightheaded. A dull pain under my ribs that came and went. I chalked it up to stress or maybe menopause playing tricks. It wasn't. A routine doctor visit turned into blood work. Blood work turned into scans. Scans turned into a quiet-faced specialist saying, "We found something." It was my liver. Not the worst news, not the best. I'd need surgery. Soon. I sat in the parking lot with the engine running for nearly 20 minutes. I debated calling Emily. I even started typing out a message. But then I remembered her voice. You don't really fit the aesthetic. So I deleted the message. I told my sister instead. She drove me to the hospital. She held my hand while they prepped me for surgery. And when I woke up, groggy, sore, and scared, my sister was still there. Not my daughter. Recovery wasn't easy. I had a scar that hurt like betrayal and pain meds that made me feel like I was floating through someone else's life. Still, I told no one. Especially not Emily. And for weeks she didn't notice. She never asked where I'd been. She didn't catch that I hadn't answered her last 3 texts. She didn't wonder why I hadn't dropped off any baby gifts. Until she needed something. Hey Mom. Her voice chirped over voicemail one afternoon. I know it's last minute, but could you come help pack the hospital bag? I'm so behind and Jason's useless with lists. I didn't answer. An hour later. Are you okay? I haven't heard from you. No, I wasn't okay. But I'd survived something. In every sense of the word. And now I was starting to feel something unexpected. Clarity. It was in that silence, those quiet days post-surgery, the long hours knitting alone, the emptiness where her concern should have been, that I began to see the years I'd given her not as a badge of motherhood, but as the currency I'd been robbed of. Every birthday I'd thrown alone, every school play I'd left work early to attend, every sacrifice she treated as standard, all the apologies I'd made to keep peace, the forgiveness I gave without being asked. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Anger would have been a gift. No, I was done. Quietly done. I didn't go to the hospital when she went into labor. I didn't respond when Jason texted. She's asking for you. I didn't reply to the picture she sent of the baby, beautiful pink-cheeked, wrapped in the blanket I'd finished weeks earlier and left on her doorstep without a note. I watched from afar as she posted photos with captions like, 3 generations of strong women, featuring Jason's mother, not me. And in the comments, people said how lucky she was to have such a supportive family. I didn't feel spite. I felt freedom. 3 weeks after the baby was born, she called me sobbing. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. He won't stop crying. I haven't slept. Mom, I'm so tired. And that's when I felt the shift. The power had returned, not because I held it over her, but because I finally understood I didn't owe her anything. Love is not slavery, and forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the same place you were hurt. I offered help, calmly, boundaried. I showed up the next morning with a meal, not a halo. I rocked the baby while she slept. I didn't bring up the shower, or the surgery. Not then, but the truth would come out. When the time was right. And when it did, when I told her everything gently weeks later over tea, you could see the weight of guilt settle into her face like a storm cloud. You had surgery? And didn't tell me. I smiled tired. You made it clear how much my presence meant to you. She cried, apologized, begged. And I let her. I didn't comfort her. Not this time. Because sometimes guilt isn't meant to be soothed. It's meant to be felt, to fester just enough to change you. We're rebuilding slowly. On my terms now. With honesty. With earned grace. And when people ask me why I didn't tell my daughter about my surgery, I say, because she taught me I was invisible. So I vanished. Just long enough to find myself again. Emily didn't sleep the night after I told her about the surgery. I know this because at 3:14 a.m. I got a message from her. I don't know how I didn't see it, Mom. I feel like a monster. I didn't respond. Because here's the thing about guilt. It's not a punishment. It's a mirror. And you have to sit with it long enough to see your reflection. She called the next day. Twice. Left another voicemail. You should have told me. I would have come. I would have dropped everything. But I knew that wasn't true. Because she had already dropped me, months earlier, like an accessory that clashed with her decor. I didn't have the energy to explain what she already knew in her bones. And still I heard the girl in her voice. Not the woman who had dismissed me, but the little girl who used to cry when her favorite stuffed bunny ripped, who used to crawl into my lap after bad dreams. And I thought, how did that child become this adult who can't see me? And then painfully I realized I trained her not to see me. Because that's what caretakers do. We shrink, soften our edges, smooth the road ahead so they never trip. We patch things behind the scenes and smile so wide they never see our exhaustion. We let them believe love means disappearing. And one day they believe it so deeply they expect it. Flashback, 2003. Emily was 9. I had just come home from my second job. I worked nights cleaning office buildings, weekends as a receptionist. That evening I forgot to take the trash bins out. One small oversight in a life of constant overfunctioning. Emily had thrown a tantrum. She didn't want the dinner I cooked. She was mad her school sweater hadn't been washed. I said I needed it today, she screamed. I remember standing there, holding that crumpled blue sweater in one hand and a dirty dish in the other, exhausted, heart pounding, and just gave in. Apologized. Promised to do better. She stopped crying immediately. Hugged me. I thought I'd done the right thing. Calmed the storm. But that was the night she learned. Mom will always fold. Even when she's breaking. Present day. Emily asked to come over. I said yes because healing requires confrontation. And I was ready. When she walked in, she looked thinner. Pale. Her hair was tied up messily, and there were shadows under her eyes. She sat across from me like she wasn't sure she was welcome. I've been awful, she said, voice hoarse. I didn't jump to reassure her. I simply nodded. I don't know what's wrong with me. When I found out I was pregnant, I was so overwhelmed. Jason's family had all these ideas. His mom offered to host the shower. And suddenly there were planners and mood boards and hashtags and she was spiraling, justifying. I held up a hand gently. You don't have to explain the party. Her mouth open, closed. She was stunned I wasn't going to argue. It wasn't the party, I said. It was the message. She swallowed hard. That you don't belong. Yes. Tears filled her eyes, but I held her gaze steady. I needed her to hear me, truly hear me, for the first time in years. I let you believe I didn't have limits. I let you think my love came without needs. That's on me. But Emily, love that erases a person isn't love. It's consumption. She buried her face in her hands. I was so selfish. I didn't say no, sweetie, you weren't. Because she had been. And denial wouldn't free either of us. Instead, I said, selfishness is learned. And unlearn it. She nodded slowly. We sat in silence for a long while, the kind that feels like something sacred is being rebuilt one brick at a time. Then softly she asked, why didn't you tell me about the surgery? I looked at her for a long time. You told me I didn't fit, I said. So I stopped trying to fit. That was the truth. But the whole truth? I didn't tell her because I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to wonder, to fear she'd lost me. It was the only power I had left, and I'd used it. Not in rage, not to punish, but to wake her up. Was it petty? Maybe. But when you spend decades being invisible, your first act of visibility feels like rebellion. Later that week, she asked to visit again. This time with the baby. I agreed. She came with a soft apology written across her shoulders. No makeup, no filters, no Pinterest perfect energy. Just a tired new mother, holding out an olive branch in the form of a 6-week-old bundle of need. When she handed me the baby, I expected something inside me to snap into place. That mythical grandmother magic people talk about. Instead, what I felt was caution. Not toward the baby, toward her. I realized in that moment trust would take time. You don't betray someone's dignity and then waltz back into their heart with a cooing infant and expect everything to reset. Still, I cradled the child. I sang quietly. I rocked gently, while she curled up on my couch and fell asleep for the first time in weeks. And I allowed myself to feel proud. Not of what I'd endured, but of what I was becoming. A woman with boundaries. A mother with limits. A grandmother who would not disappear. The week after she brought the baby, I found myself staring into mirrors longer than usual. Not out of vanity. Out of curiosity. Who was this woman? The one who didn't rush to forgive. Who didn't offer to stay the night so her daughter could sleep. Who didn't fumble over apologies she wasn't supposed to make. I looked older, yes. There were new creases near my eyes, and the scar beneath my ribs still itched when I breathed too deep. But there was something else too. A quiet steel behind my eyes. The absence of that desperate, aching need to be needed. It felt peaceful. That peace is what led me to therapy. I hadn't been in decades. The last time I'd seen a therapist, Emily was 6 and I was still lying to myself about how much I could carry alone. I went 3 times, nodded politely, then said I was fine. And then I never went back. But now? Now I wanted to be seen. Not as a mother. Not as a grandmother. Just as me. Therapy week 1. Why now? The therapist asked. She was in her 40s, I guessed. Calm. No nonsense. The kind of woman who looked like she'd call you out with kindness but not let you get away with anything. I think, I said slowly, I finally have enough space in my life to hear my own voice. She smiled at that. And what does that voice say? I paused. Then with more truth than I expected. It says, where the hell have you been? We both laughed. And then I cried. The kind of crying that comes from a wound you'd convinced yourself had scarred over. Emily kept texting. Little things. Do you want to come to the baby's checkup with us? Can you watch him for an hour while I get groceries? Thinking of you. Pic attached blue heart. And she was trying. I could see that. There was softness in her now that hadn't been there before. A kind of gentleness earned through exhaustion. Motherhood humbled her in a way nothing else had. But humility isn't the same as accountability. One afternoon she called in tears. Jason's mom keeps telling me I'm doing everything wrong. That the baby should be sleeping through the night by now. And that I'm spoiling him. I listened. She continued, voice quaking. Sometimes I just want to get in the car and drive away. And for a moment I wanted to wrap her up, smooth her hair and tell her everything would be okay. But I didn't. Instead I said, that must feel really lonely. She paused, clearly waiting for me to say more. To offer a solution. To offer myself. But I was learning. I wasn't her crutch anymore. Can you come over? She finally asked. I can come, I said gently. But only if you're looking for company. Not rescue. Silence on the other end. Then, okay. Company. Later that evening, I brought over some soup. Not homemade store-bought. A small but intentional decision. I used to bend over backwards to make everything perfect for her. Now I showed up as is. She looked worn. Eyes rimmed with fatigue. Her shirt stained with something unidentifiable. She handed me the baby wordlessly, and I held him while she picked at the soup in silence. You're doing better than you think, I said eventually. I don't feel like I am. That's how you know you are. She exhaled. A real one. Her shoulders dropped slightly. I'm scared he'll hate me someday, she said. That I'll mess him up. I looked down at the sleeping baby. He might. A little. We all do, I said. But the difference is whether you ever acknowledge it. She looked up sharply, sensing the weight behind my words. You're still angry at me, she said. No, I replied. I'm awake now. That's different. Therapy week 3. You're practicing what I like to call soft distance, my therapist said. It's not rejection. It's choosing to stay close without losing yourself. I like that phrase, soft distance. Felt like an emotional exhale. A way to be present without being consumed. She asked me what I wanted now moving forward. And for the first time in years, I didn't answer with someone else's needs. I said, I want a life where my value isn't measured by how much I give away. She smiled. That's a beginning. 1 month later, Emily tried to test the boundary. She invited me to her house. It was her first attempt at hosting since the baby. I could tell she wanted to make an impression. Fresh flowers on the table, jazz music playing softly in the background. We ate. Small talk. Comfortable enough. Then came the trap. So, she said lightly, buttering a roll, Jason and I were thinking it would be helpful if you could take the baby 3 nights a week. I blinked. 3. Just for a few months, she rushed. Until we get on our feet. You'd be saving us thousands. You're retired and... I held up my hand. And for the first time in her life, my daughter saw me say no. No, I said simply. I won't commit to that. She looked like she'd been slapped. I thought you wanted to be part of his life. I do, I said, but not at the cost of my own. There was a long tense silence. Then she said it. The thing children say when they can't believe you're no longer bending. You've changed. I met her eyes. Calm. Steady. I've returned, I said. This is who I was before I forgot myself. She didn't speak again for a while. And I let the silence sit. I wasn't angry. I wasn't cold. I was clear. And clarity, I've learned, is the most loving thing you can give someone who's always mistaken your kindness for a contract. 2 weeks after I told Emily no for the first time in her adult life, she stopped calling. Not completely, but the tone shifted. Messages came like business memos. Can you send the baby's immunization record from last week? I think the pediatrician office emailed you instead. Do you remember where you bought that white noise machine? Ours broke. Just checking. Are you still coming to his 4-month checkup? If not, I'll cancel your name from the front desk. No more photos. No more little heart emojis. Just logistics. At first, I told myself she was busy. Overwhelmed. Then I remembered the pattern. When Emily couldn't control me, she withdrew. As a child, she'd learned early that withholding affection worked. She could pout, go silent, roll her eyes, and eventually I'd fold. Because I couldn't stand the idea of her not loving me. But I see it now. What I wanted wasn't love. It was approval disguised as connection. And approval is a performance. It requires you to stay in costume. This time I stayed seated. I didn't chase her silence. I didn't offer to talk things through again. I didn't send gifts or apologies or texts asking, "Are we okay?" Instead, I wrote a letter. On paper. In my handwriting. No emojis. No disclaimers. Just truth. Dear Emily, you've been quiet and I understand. You're disappointed in me. I said no. I want you to know I didn't say no because I don't love you. I said no because I do. I love you enough to want you to stand on your own. I love you enough to stop enabling your belief that my life doesn't count unless it serves yours. I carried you for 9 months, raised you for 30 years, and kept carrying you long after I should have let you walk. And I'm sorry for that. Not for loving you, but for never showing you how to love me back. You were raised by a woman who thought disappearing was the price of motherhood. I thought if I was selfless enough, kind enough, quiet enough, I'd earn a permanent place in your life. I was wrong. Because invisibility doesn't breed intimacy. It breeds entitlement. You don't see me as a person with edges. You see me as a shape that fits around your life. So this is me redrawing the lines. I will always be here for you and for my grandson. But I won't disappear again to earn your comfort. You are welcome in my life. But only if you see me in it. With love, Mom. I mailed it. Not a text. Not an email. Not something she could skim on the go. She had to hold it. I pictured her reaction. Irritation, confusion, maybe even tears. I didn't expect immediate change. I just wanted her to feel the weight of something she could no longer control. A week later, I wasn't invited to Jason's birthday dinner. They posted photos online, his parents, their friends, even Emily's college roommate and her husband, smiling over a cake. No seat for me. Not even a mention. I felt it in my chest like a bruise, a dull pressure behind the ribs. It wasn't about the dinner. It was about the message. Again, you don't belong here. But this time the ache didn't spiral into shame. Settled, heavy but honest. Like standing outside a house you once built. And finally admitting it isn't your home anymore. I let myself cry. Then I made myself a nice dinner. Lit a candle. Turned on Nina Simone and let her voice carry me through the silence. And I whispered to myself, you belong to you. 3 days later, Emily showed up. Unannounced. Eyes red. Baby on her hip. I opened the door slowly. She didn't speak right away. Just stood there, visibly uncertain. Then she handed me the letter. My letter. Fold it, creased, read and reread. I've been mad at you, she said, voice trembling. But also, I think I'm mad at myself. I read this 5 times. And every time I hated it less. I nodded, still holding the door. I'm not used to seeing you like this, she added. That's because you're used to seeing me small. She swallowed hard. Then, can I come in? She sat on the edge of the couch, rocking the baby slowly, eyes darting everywhere but at me. I'm scared, she finally said. Of what? That I don't know how to do this. That I'm not a good mom. I took a breath. Being a good mom isn't about never messing up. It's about being honest when you do. You're already ahead of where I was. She looked up, stunned. I continued. I thought if I never complained, if I never let you see me struggle, I'd protect you. But that wasn't love. That was performance. And I'm done performing. She started to cry. Real heaving sobs. And I let her. I didn't interrupt. I didn't fix. I didn't rush in with soup and tissues and reassurance. I simply stayed. When she could breathe again, she whispered, I don't want to lose you. You're not going to lose me, I said. You're just going to have to meet me now. That night, she left with a hug that lingered. A little longer than usual. Not desperate. Not guilt-ridden. Just real. And that night I didn't cry. I slept. Not because everything was healed, but because I no longer had to carry the weight of being everything. I was finally becoming someone. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. And something unusual happened. Nothing. No drama. No begging. No guilt-soaked messages. No emergency baby drop-offs. Just silence. And space. The kind of space that felt intentional. Not a wall, a pause. Emily didn't text me daily, but when she did, it came with a different energy. No assumptions. No sugar-coated demands. Just small check-ins, cautiously worded. I've been thinking a lot about what you wrote. I didn't know how much I didn't know. I started journaling. I get why you do it now. Would love to see you sometime, no pressure. Just you. The shift was quiet but seismic. She was learning to approach me without a grip in her hand. And I was learning to receive her without bracing for a blow. Then on a rainy Sunday afternoon, she arrived at my door again. This time with an envelope. No baby. No distractions. Before I give this to you, she said nervously, you should know I almost threw it out 5 times. She handed it over. It was a letter. Her handwriting. Shaky in places. I read it in front of her. And every word peeled away another layer of the years between us. Mom, I used to think you were weak. Always giving. Always tired. Always putting yourself last. But now I realize it's the hardest thing in the world to keep showing up for people who never give back. And you did that for decades. I thought love meant you'd never say no. I thought if you really loved me, you'd sacrifice without blinking. But now that I'm a mother, I see what that cost you. You became invisible to keep me whole. And I mistook your invisibility for a lack of identity. I'm sorry. Not just for the baby shower. Not just for the surgery. But for every time I made your worth conditional on my comfort. You didn't owe me your entire life. I see that now. And I want to know you, really know you as the woman behind the mother. If you'll let me. Love, Emily. I didn't cry. Instead I breathed. Deeply. As if my lungs had been waiting for this exact moment. Then I stood, walked to the kitchen drawer, and pulled out a small wooden box. I handed it to her. Inside. Pictures of me before I was anyone's mother. In college. On hiking trips. Smiling at a music festival with red lipstick and a wildflower crown. A printed poem I wrote in 1983. A photo strip with her father before the marriage unraveled. This is who I was, I said softly, before I folded myself into the shape you needed. She looked at each photo as if they were sacred artifacts. I want to meet her, she whispered. You're on your way, I said. The final boundary came gently. We were having tea a few days later and she said, "I've been thinking of going back to work. Just part-time." I smiled. "That's a great idea. But childcare is so expensive," she added, tentative. I waited. "I know I asked you before and I understand why you said no. But if you ever want to watch him once a week, even just for an afternoon, I'd love for him to know you better." And there it was, the first real invitation. No pressure. No guilt. Just a choice. I took a sip of tea, then replied, "Once a week works for me. But not on Fridays. Fridays are mine." She blinked, surprised. "What do you do on Fridays?" "Whatever I want," I said. "Sometimes I paint. Sometimes I nap. Sometimes I go sit in a park and read books I never had time for." She smiled. "That sounds beautiful." It is. And that's how we began again. Not with grand gestures. Not with perfect apologies. But with new rituals. One visit a week. A slow rebuilding. A shared respect. She didn't ask me to be her crutch anymore. And I stopped trying to be her redemption. We met woman to woman. Not savior and child. Not martyr and heir. Just two tired, recovering souls, braiding something gentle from the ashes of what once burned. One night, as I tucked my grandson into his crib, he reached up and touched my face. "Gammy," he said, mispronouncing it. His little fingers traced my cheek, then settled around my thumb. And for the first time in my life I knew I was no longer invisible. Not to him. Not to her. Not to myself.